Is what makes us will also be a way to help us. I mean, that it will seem like that's good. I think,
Good morning, everybody. We will be beginning shortly. Request everybody to kindly put their phones in silence. Thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinct honor and privilege to welcome you all to the Shri Abhay Tripathi Memorial Lecture, an occasion dedicated to remembering a life of service, intellect, and enduring contribution. We are deeply honored by the presence of our distinguished chief guest, Professor Abhay, member Niti Aayog, whose leadership and vision in science, technology, and national development continue to inspire institutions and individuals alike. We are equally privileged to have with us Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, founder president, Center for Digital Economy Policy, who graces this occasion as the Chair of Excellence. I extend a warm welcome to President USI Council, Air Marshal Tejinder Singh, esteemed council members of USI, officers from the armed forces, senior dignitaries from the Government of India, eminent scientists, members of academia, respected veterans, and all other esteemed guests present here today. A very special and heartfelt welcome to the family members, friends, colleagues, and associates of late Shri Abhay Tripathi, whose presence makes this memorial lecture all the more meaningful. Today, as we gather in his memory, we celebrate not only the person that he was, but also the values he stood for: commitment, public purpose, and service to the nation. This lecture is a tribute to that legacy and an opportunity for all of us to reflect on ideas advancing the national interest. With these words, may I request our Director General, Vice Admiral Shri Singh sir, for his welcome remarks.
Thank you, Mike. Professor Abhay, Member Science and Technology, Niti Aayog, Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya, President CDEP, and the current holder of the Chair of Excellence for this year's Shri Abhay Tripathi Chair of Excellence, Ms. Richa Mishra Tripathi, family members of the Tripathi family, Ms. Janvi, Ms. Krishna Kant Tripathi, Air Marshal Tejinder Singh, Chief of Integrated Defense Staff to the Chairman Chiefs of Staff Committee and the President USI Council, Commandant NDC, flag officers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my proud privilege to welcome you all this morning for the second Shri Abhay Tripathi Memorial Lecture. Shri Abhay Tripathi is well known to all of us who have done NDC between 2012 and 2019 as the SDS. He was approachable, straightforward, said it like he saw it, and he normally saw it very clearly. In fact, I can do no better than to recount a small couple of lines that were shared with me by a colleague who couldn't make it today. And he said, just tell you, he spoke his mind without fear and did what has to be done. He knew facts, he had a clear thought process. His classes in NDC were full of enthusiasm and a great opportunity to collect pearls of wisdom. That knowledge comes in handy every day in life far too often. This was Shri Abhay Tripathi ji. Whenever we visited out of Delhi, I had the fortune of spending just about a month with him before I finished my NDC. But every time that he came to wherever I was posted, he would send a message across. And I would go, and it would be a wonderful evening that we spent together. And I can vouch for these comments. It was wonderful listening to those pearls of wisdom, those nuggets. It is indeed fitting, and we are grateful to the family of Shri Abhay Tripathi that they chose USI to host the memorial lecture in his name and in his memory. We are today also equally fortunate that on a day like this, for a man like him, that we have Professor Abhay Karandikar speaking to us about national technology policy and innovation, and Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya telling us about some of the work he's doing this year at the Chair of Excellence on Digital India challenges, conundrums, and the way forward. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to all of you having braved the rains and the floods and the traffic for joining us, and all those who joined us online all over the country today for this memorial lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. May I now invite Mrs. Richa Mishra Tripathi for introductory remarks.
And namaste to all present here and those who have joined us virtually. Thank you for joining us for Abhay Tripathi Memorial Lecture. Vice Admiral S.J. Singh and members of USI, thank you for collaborating with us. Professor Abhay Karandikar, member SNC, Niti Ayog, the man who actually needs no introduction. This is the second lecture under this chair and fourth of the lecture series. Professor Karandikar is known to work on a principle, if I've not got it wrong, tracking him as a journalist, that how do we turn research into growth and technology into security? Am I right? And therefore the theme of the lecture, emerging technologies like quantum and AI for growth and security. Before we go further, let me tell you why we started this lecture. This lecture series began as a tribute to my husband, Abhay Tripathi. The idea was to keep the conversation going on the issues that shape our lives, especially the economy. Because at the end of the day, economics is about numbers and working smart to reach our goals. And that's how we choose our themes. Through this platform, we want to talk about what really matters to the people on the ground. And what should matter more today than the technologies that decide our growth and our security? The state where I'm coming from, I mean, I think it's my adopted state now, Andhra Pradesh. We always the first mover in technology. The chief minister is the one who gave Hyderabad its identity as an IT hub, and it's competing much better with Bangalore than anyone would have ever thought. The same man now has initiated the quantum movement in the state. Now, why I talk about it and why I want to raise these issues to Professor Karandikar is because it sounds like science fiction to me. To a common person like me, it's all Greek and Latin. I have my concerns like many here, and I do not claim to be not worried about quantum and AI penetrating into my daily life. We use UPI and online banking daily. Will quantum computers make our money and data unsafe? How will small towns and common people in India benefit? With AI, as we see a lot of fake videos and fake news, how do we make sure quantum and AI are used to help people and not to confuse or cheat them? To conclude, Abhay Tripathi believed in talking about what truly affects us. Quantum and AI are not distant ideas anymore. They are about our jobs, our safety, our future. And this is what we are here to understand today. I once again express my gratitude on behalf of the family to Professor Karnadikar and the team of USI. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now by opportunity to Shara to deliver the Chair of Excellence Science on digital modernization, the geopolitics of technology.
Very good morning to all of you. I'm truly humbled and honored to be bestowed this chair. I'm grateful to the TG, USI, and his colleagues, and Brigadier Vivek Verma to find that I'm befitting for this particular role. So I'm deeply grateful for having me for this chair. Thank you so much. So with that, I'll give a quick background, and I'm trying to keep it short as to what is digital colonization and therefore what we need to do. It's been a journey of almost 27, 28 years to push the concept of how a deprivation of technology and not having control over technology leads to a lack of sovereignty, which is why around 2004, 2005, I coined the term digital colonization. And then I was accused of being jingoistic because people did not understand the background to it, and which is where we coined the term technological sovereignty. And from 2010 to 2014, we ran the National Conclave on Technological Sovereignty at SAM Management Center with the Chief of Army Staff. So that's a quick background. Now, moving forward, next slide, please, as to why we talked about digital colonization. Do I have a click on there or something? Next slide.
Yeah. Thank you, team. Just provide this slide. Yeah.
So, why do we have battles? Why do we have war? Why are we having the Iran war? Why was there a war in Venezuela? It is basically to enrich one country at the cost of another country. That's clearly what the bottom line is. Either somebody wants oil, or in the olden days, gold, and so on and so forth. So they enrich themselves by taking away wealth, or like what happened in India, by subjugating the people, because that is a continuous form of enriching themselves. When you come in and you loot and you go away, it's a one-time game that happens. When you stay and you enslave an entire mass of people, that's a continuous flow of wealth. And that is what the purpose of war has been. So war is fought in all fronts that lead to wealth generation. And the reason I'm saying that, obviously, we all say that there are multiple fronts to warfare. But when you link that statement to the purpose of warfare, you will understand how warfare has penetrated every layer of how we interact with the rest of the world, how we do trade, as an example. Why is it that everything that we sell is priced cheap in the global market? Everything we buy back from the West and now from China is much more expensive than what we sell. And it's very easy to calculate why there is an issue. If you look at minerals being taken away from Congo, let's go back and calculate how much effort is needed to mine those minerals. For that effort, for every man day, are we providing enough calories to the miners to justify the price at which those minerals are being sold? The answer clearly is no. If you look at the price of an iPhone, and nothing against any particular brand, but just explaining the structure, we all know that the bill of material for manufacturing an iPhone is not more than $300. And at what price? $1,500. Right? What is the balance? It's termed as IPR. And we'll go to the details of that in the next 15 minutes that's remaining. Next slide.
Yeah, slide.
Okay, there is a clicker.
You're right.
Oh, thank you. That's it. So wealth is what? As I said, gold, jewelry, precious stones. Let's just stop here for a moment. What is gold? Gold is nothing but human labor along with technology working on a piece of land. Correct me if I'm wrong. Right? What is the key part of it? Human labor is available everywhere. Piece of land and technology. What happens when you have the technology and you don't have the piece of land? You try and get the piece of land. You try to get the oil wells in Iran, you try to get the oil wells in Venezuela. And therefore, the core of wealth generation in modern history, and I mean modern history in the last 2000 years as modern history, is technology. We all know what wood steel is. For those who don't know, wood steel was the first steel in the world. It had flexibility. If some of you have seen already the martial arts in Kerala, we know Kerala is the mother of all martial arts, that the Shaolin temple was set up by a monk from South. We see the nunchuck, which is a flexible weapon in China, but we don't see the whipsaw, the long steel whipsaw that is used in Kalaripayattu. Why is it that the entire martial arts went to China, but the whipsaw did not do? Because there's deep technology in that whipsaw. It's a flexible piece of steel. How is that possible? A steel being flexible works like a whip. That was technology. Kalaripayattu could do what they could do because it was backed by the industrial strength that was there in Kerala. They could create the web sword based on the wood steel, which was a high carbon steel. For technologists out there, and Professor Karandikar will told me that if you put too much of carbon, then steel becomes brittle. So how come, I mean, or iron in those days? So how come you put more carbon and suddenly it becomes as sharp and as strong and flexible as possible? So why did Damascus sword become the de facto standard of the world in terms of weaponry? Because it had wood steel in it, which made it flexible. So when you fight it, would not break, it would bend. And therefore its longevity was much more. Wood is obviously a Tamil word, and South India and Sri Lanka were the capital of it for over 1,000 years. And then it vanished under the stress from British. We will cover that on some other day. Similarly, sugar manufacturing. The Tang dynasty in the 7th century kept pressing Raja Harshvardhan to part with the sugar technology, and he didn't. To give a little background, you've heard of mystery, right? You have this crystalline sugar, it's mystery. How do you think that word mystery came in from? Misra, absolutely. The technology was created in Egypt, in Misra, and so it became mystery. When we talk about sugar, The word sugar comes from the word sucre from sarkara, which was an Indian word because the sugar technology was created in India. Rest of the world calls it sugar or sucre or samar or shakkar, which is the Arabic word. What do we call sugar? Chini. Because what happened was the Tang dynasty finally gave up and sent a raiding army over the Gangetic Plains. They caught hold of the sugar manufacturers, slaughtered some 3,000 people in the Gangetic Plain. And this is along with a Tibetan and a Nepalese general. And they captured the manufacturers back to China, and they did what China does very well, manufacture it at scale and send it back. It's coming back from Chini. That's how we lost it. And that was not the first time we lost technology to either China or to the West zinc manufacturing. You all know brass is called the fool's gold. And what is the difference between brass and bronze? Bronze is that brass is called basically copper and zinc embedded in it. So in whichever form they would dissolve, they would form the bronze, and we were happy with it. The challenge with zinc is to extract. If you make it too hot, it vaporizes. So you have to extract it in a way that becomes liquid, and you capture it before it turns into vapor and it vanishes. We crack the code. It is essentially they put it upside down and put ice below and did some stuff. So 100 years, that was an Indian technology. We minted money out of it. In fact, India did not become rich in the 14th, 15th, 16th century by selling vegetables to you. We were selling technology. Every single thing over here we were selling. We had the zinc technology, which is why we could create brass, which was sold as fool's gold because it shone like that. And what eventually, and I can go on each one of them, shipbuilding, calculus. I mean, shipbuilding, coming back to the zinc, the technology was taken away from the Zarawar mines. And then in the 17th century by the British, they patented it. And when Hindustan Zinc Limited was formed in the 20th century, it was licensed back to go back and mine zinc in the same mines from where it was taken. The Chinese took it about 50, 60 years before the British did. So we have been losing technology. Shipbuilding, there were specific laws that were passed to make sure that shipbuilding stops. And it's there in the British Parliamentary Archives available on internet. 1813, the shipbuilders of Britain went to the King of Britain and said, could you please help us? And if you can't, then obviously we'll start to test because Indian ships are bigger, better, and tougher. So many old technology was better, they would carry more, they were cheaper, their life was longer. And therefore, as you call it in the modern world, the total cost of ownership of Indian ships is far lower than the British ships built by the British. And hence they said we need to do something. Otherwise, when the Royal Navy of Britain needs ship repair, you won't find it. You would have died. But the passed a law saying that any ship made in India, even if it's British, will have to pay extra duty for the goods coming in on that ship. And that was the first blow, half of the ships. And that was only for ships which were less than 500 tons. Why less than 500 tons is because bigger than that, the British could not make. And so the shipyards in Surat and Bengal were manufacturing this humongous 1,000-ton plus ships. In those days, 1,000 tons was ridiculous. Eventually, 2 years later, they passed another law banning Indian ships completely from the transatlantic route, where they were basically using the large ships to carry cargo from West Africa. What does cargo mean? Slaves. So carrying these large amount of slaves from West Africa on Indian ships to America, dump the slaves, pick up gold, go to UK, to Britain, dump the gold, come back to West Africa and carry. More slaves you could carry, the more money you make. And all the ships were largely Indian made. The second law around 1815 or so stopped that from. And therefore, the ship industry in India died. But the next wave of technology came in, which is iron ships. We went there. And why is that important? Is because technology is not just a book or a manual of how to build things. It is people, it's processes, it's tribal knowledge in the factory floor of how things work in terms of supply chains. Once that goes, you're out of the race for the next kind of technology. So technology is either a virtuous cycle, so you build it, you make the better one and the better one and the better one, or it's a vicious cycle, because once you start degrading, you won't have the money to feed back to the next generation. And therefore, as Patty was mentioning, the big thing in terms of AI, what's happening in today's world is those who have already built up the AI and were there ahead of the world by just 3 months. What happens? People are paying to train them. Every time you use a chat GPT and you pay for that monthly fees and you upload your data, you're training it, along with the fact that you're also paying for it. So you're paying for somebody else's model and you're training it. What happens to the Indian AIs? They would need a whole bunch of crutch to be able to reach that level. And every month, every 3 months is like a decade in terms of AI. And those are the challenges that people like Professor Karandikar are trying to fight and make sure that we have our technology to that level. Otherwise, we fall into a vicious trap. And as all of us keep saying, oh, we missed this bus and we missed that bus, and it continues. And our question every year is that why are we still missing buses? Next slide, please. So each one of them will take half an hour to explain. So I'm just going a little quickly. Sorry. So therefore, I redefined colonization in 2005, and it's not just people coming in and taking over a country and then enslaving the people. It was much more. It is a disproportionate extraction of economic benefit through either from an area of influence, through manipulation of the rules of engagement, through either force or deceit. And so we had three levels of colonization. We had the social colonization, which happened in every country. So there was a set of people who would then extract disproportionate benefit from the rest of the economy. It happened in UK, it happened in Europe, in Indonesia, Japan, everywhere. And then when they thought how will they get richer, because they've already colonized their own people, like other, which became the classic political intrigue. And then where we are right now, which is the technology, that I don't need to control. What I need to do is I make sure that I get disproportionate economic benefit. Every trade rule, every law I pass, every agreement that I get into, that benefits me disproportionately. And the best example I refer to is if I thought he had broken the rule. It was posted that outlet son against the rule, against the law, become the king. The question is, whose law was it? We didn't sign that law. It was not our rule, it was not our law. It was put on our head. There are many such. Why did India sign the watershed agreement with Pakistan? I know many of you from military go and okay, because what made us sign that agreement, no upper riparian country in the world has signed an agreement. Do we have an agreement with China in sharing the river waters? No. Which upper riparian country in the world has an agreement? In that year, we desperately needed food. And what the global policeman of those days, and even now I would guess what Americans did, is it fine? The corn that is going to be, or the wheat that was going to be fed to the cattle, will send that to you. But with a gun on your head, you need to sign this water sharing agreement with Pakistan. Is that our agreement? In the regular law, if somebody is some agreement is signed under duress, does it hold any validity? And all of this happened. So what we see globally is first, free trade was used as a mechanism for getting disproportionate economic benefit. The British said, well, the Burmese king, you are not allowing free trade to happen, quote unquote, and therefore we have the right to attack you to enable free trade. From there, we came down to IPR patents and so on and so forth. We didn't hear about IPR and patents till about 1960s. And why did 1960s suddenly become important for IPRs and patents to happen? And they would export professors to my alma mater, which is also the institute that Professor Abhay was a director of. They sent professors to IIT Kanpur to teach to the professors what is IPR, what is patents, because they could therefore extract disproportionate economic benefit through IPRs and patents. Right? And there are all kinds of arguments that's been ingrained in our head. Our point is, well, if I spend so much of time and effort in building up these patents, why should not a benefit be given? And I have in my slides, which I'll probably not be able to cover today, is the patent war that erupted between Samsung and iPhone. And what was the patent war about? That Samsung was blatantly violating Apple's state-of-the-art patent. What was the patent about? That anything which is flat and it's got rounded corners is iPhone's patent, and nobody can therefore violate it. Brilliant. Just a phone with a round edge is a patent, and violating it led to billions of dollars of each other suing each other. That's the level of patents we're talking about. 90% of the patents fall under that category. It's not rocket science that is being patented. And I'm not saying that we should therefore not give any protection to patents. Why was there such a pressure in 1960s? Because last of the colonies went out in 1960s. So how do you continue to maintain your standard of living, keep your citizens happy, make them disproportionately rich compared to what their economic input is? You can do this only when you control the way trade is happening. And therefore, every 20 years, something or the other would come up in the global arena. After IPR and patents, we had the Asians knocking on the doors of Europe saying, well, fair enough, you did what you did, and this is all IPR and patent compliant. Here are the manufactured products. Take it. Because the construct was that raw materials will come from the formerly colonized East and the colonized places, and manufacturing will happen in the West. That door fell. And so what did Europe do? Come up with the biggest non-tariff trade barrier possible, which was ISO 9000 and many other non-barrier trades. They said that you need to have this certification given by a Dutch company to which you have to pay through your nose. By the way, a patent globally will cost you around $25,000 to $30,000. A kid in IIT Delhi who comes out with a new, let's say, prefetch queue will not be able to patent. They will not have the money. Even if they patent the prefetch queue in a microprocessor, who will they give it to? If you give it to a Motorola or IBM, I mean, there is no Motorola now, but IBM or an Intel, it's a fine. I'll take one patent of yours. I'll give you 10 patents in return. What will this kid do with this 10 patents? You do not have the ecosystem and the manufacturing capability to use anything that you can, which is why, remember the vicious cycle? Why will I even come out with a new technology when I'll not have access to the market? I'll have zero access to the market. So it's a huge and humongous effort to break this ecosystem and come out with their own technology and sustain it economically. And those are learnings that China had very, very early on. And you can take those examples, the WAPI versus Wi-Fi, I've run out completely out of time. They had on a small Wi-Fi standard, there were 20 rounds of discussion between Madame Wu, who was the vice premier of China, and Dick Cheney, who was the vice president of US. At the same time, Jaswant Singh and Steve Talbot had 16 rounds of discussion on the nuclear deal. Nuclear deal versus a small standard in wireless. There are obviously some ramifications to wireless because if that went through, the manufacturing ecosystem would have moved to China much faster than what it did now. And the standards would have been controlled by China much faster than what's happening now. This I'm talking about 2003-4, around that time. And nuclear deal, only 16 rounds of discussion with relatively junior officers. That is the impact that we had. Then came TRIPS, trade-related intellectual property stuff, which again said you must, with a gun on the head, respect our intellectual property. By the way, we'll never let our intellectual property leak. There are laws like CFIUS in the US, which will ensure that critical technologies are never leaked, but you need to sign that. That led to the process patents being moved into product patents for pharmaceuticals. If you speak to Latin American countries and African countries, they'll say that Indian medicines saved millions of lives in their country. And that's because of our IPR regime. We do need IPR, but it has to be our regime. It cannot be dictated by anyone else. And then WTO, and then finally we see CBAM, which is the carbon border adjustment mechanism. It basically says if you are selling me goods which has got more carbon emission while manufacturing, will tax you. All sounds good on the top, but the good of humanity will not allow child labor, will not allow this, will not allow carbon releasing manufacturing to come into Europe, will tax you. Beneath it is an issue that it is a trade protection mechanism so that the West can continue to have disproportionate economic benefits. I'll just stop over here because I understand I've run out of time, but you get the drift of where we are going. And this continues to this day and will continue as we move forward. we need to break into this and this structure. And therefore, what I will be focusing on as the chair of the Abhay Tripathi chair is to focus on supply chain resilience for the military. There are small products like KTB, which are critical to ensure that there is oxygen in the submarines, oxygen in the Tejas. We have already worked on those to ensure that they're not bombed out. And what I mean by bombed out is when war happens, you have aircrafts coming in and dropping weapons. We have seen that happening in all the conflicts, which then finishes off factories and industries. What we're witnessing now is a different kind of bombing. You sell the products at 5% lower rates, and your factory is shut down because the imports are 5% lower. And therefore, very critical chemicals like KTB, PX3, without PX3, you can't have rubber, which then goes into the battlefield, into the WAP 1828, into the Shaktiman trucks. You cannot have them. So when you have a battle of attrition, you'll not be able to replace them quickly without being dependent on China. And these are our supply chain chokes, which we are discovering has been completely being dominated by China. We discover them because suddenly we see dumping happening, and we wonder, why is China so interested in dumping in a 100 crore market, 50 crore market, which is minuscule? And then we realize their targets is something far more sinister. And that's the kind of work that I will be doing for the rest of the year. Thank you so much for your question.
Request Professor Abhay Karandikar sir to please deliver his address.
Thank you very much, Admiral Sanjay Singh, DG of USI, Ms. Richa Mishra, Dr. Jayjeet Bhattacharya, all the distinguished guests. First of all, I would like to thank the Tripathi family for inviting me for delivering this Abhay Tripathi Memorial Lecture. I think, can we have the slides? So as the slides come, I think so I'm going to speak about the India's science and technology ecosystem. And I've structured my talk to sort of outline what has been our accomplishment recently, what are the challenges that still lie ahead, and how we are doing in terms of science and technology. I think Dr. Jayjeet mentioned about one aspect, but I will give you an entire ecosystem perspective. And since I've been somewhat fortunate to be involved in driving some of the transformative initiatives of the government in my role as secretary in the Ministry of Science and Technology, I will just tell you that what steps that the government is taking, and then what steps the stakeholders have to take. So this is a brief outline of the presentations, S&T landscape. What are the structural institutional interventions that the government has done, and what are the mission mode interventions the government has done? So if you look at the last 10 years from science and technology and science and engineering perspective, this has been an extremely good decade. We improved our standing in Global Innovation Index from 81st rank in 2015 to 38 now. And the Global Innovation Index is based on several parameters. And this includes,
publications, patents, technology developments, innovations, all those aspects. More importantly, I think in terms of publications only in science and engineering, and these are index publications, we are now number 3 in the world, after obviously China and US. And we are also number 3 in terms of number of PhDs produced in science and engineering. And in terms of resident Indians filing patents also, we have improved substantially. We are now number 6 in the world. So I think so we are doing sort of reasonably well, have improved significantly. In terms of our innovation ecosystem, we are now, third largest startup ecosystem in the world. We have close to 2 million startups registered. And not just the number, I think it is important to say that we are about now, in the slide it is written 120, but I know that we are now about 130 unicorns. That means the startups having a valuation of more than 10,000 crore. So that is actually quite a significant number. If 130 startups are having market valuation more than 10,000 crore rupees. And it is our estimate that about 20,000 of them are technology startups out of all. And close to 4,000 are doing real cutting edge deep tech R&D. These are like real deep tech R&D, like cell and gene therapy, which came out of IIT Bombay Immuno Act, talking of that company, or even developing quantum computers like QPI, which is now in Bangalore, has demonstrated 64 qubit quantum computer superconducting based, or a QNU lab, which has developed 1,000-kilometer QKD quantum secure link. So these are really very cutting edge technology development coming out of young innovators and startups. Now there was a report published by Australian Strategy Policy Institute, last year, and they track the research which is happening in 64 critical technologies. Now, this is just based upon the global share of the high impact research publications. This is not based upon the products and the technologies. And the interesting thing is that China leads in 57 of the 64 critical technology. It is number 1, and US leads in 7. But actually, as a country, we are also not doing bad. We are actually within top 5 in 45 of the 64 critical technologies. That means a significant high impact research is happening in our academic institutions, in IITs, in our scientific R&D labs. And some of them, as you can see, for example, in biofuels, we are number 2 in terms of high impact applications. In quantum cryptography, we are number 3. But obviously, we don't have the technologies and products in this area. So the gap remains that we are not able to convert the research that is happening in our top academic institutions and research labs into commercializable products and technologies. So there is a huge gap in the translational research, because as I mentioned, that this is really just based upon the publications in the high impact factor journals. Next slide. So there are certain therefore areas. So once I mentioned that there is a gap in translational research, but there is another somewhat more important issue, is India has about 1100 or 1200 universities or institutions. And as per the report of the Ministry of Education of NIRF ranking, only 18 of them can be considered to be the most productive. If I take medium productive, then there are about 65 of 1100 universities which can be considered as doing some high quality research. But about 1,000 of them are actually not doing any research. Now you can see that a country of 1.5 billion population and 1100 universities, despite only 65 of our academic institutions doing productive research activity, we are number 3 in terms of publications in science and engineering. We are number 3 in terms of PhDs produced in science and engineering, and we are within top 5 in 45 of the 64 critical technologies. So you can see the immense potential that the country has if 200 of our 1100 universities are performing high quality research. So India has a potential to become number 2, number 1 also. So I think that is one second gap. So one is whatever the research is happening, it is concentrated only in the tier 1 institutions, and even that research is not translating into commercializable technologies and the product. So these are actually the 2 gaps. The third gap is that as a country, we are spending less money as a percentage of the GDP. Our gross expenditure on R&D will touch about 0.9 of the GDP. In this figure, it is shown about 0.6 to 0.7, but that is based on 2021 data. The 26 data has not been released. It will be released by the end of this month, and we will touch about 0.9% of the GDP. But the more concerning fact is that in all the countries where the gross expenditure on R&D is 2 to 3% of the GDP, 70 to 80% of the expenditure is done by the private sector in the industry. Okay, only 15 to 20% is done by the government. But in our country, it is exactly the opposite. 70% of the expenditure on R&D is by the government. The private sector and the industry is spending only 20 to 30%. So this is also another gap area, and this is also the challenge why the research which is happening in the academia is not getting converted into the commercializable technologies and the products, because we need to have a robust industry ecosystem which has an in-house corporate R&D which can interact with the academia, take the research happening into the academia and translate it into the products and the technologies. So I think that is also the reason for having a weak industry academia linkages in the country. So I think these are actually the 3 challenges that we have. And as you can see, the potential is huge. We, with just 65 universities performing, we are number 3, and we are leading in 45 of the 64 critical technologies. And if our private sector, starts investing in the R&D, we have a potential in the science and technology ecosystem really to sort of lead. And I think that is really the challenge that is there before the policymakers and the government. Now, these are the few challenges that I have summarized. Only a few Indian universities dominate the high quality research outputs. There are limited faculty incentives for industry engagement. There is private sector R&D spending remains limited compared to global standards, and industry academia interaction is still evolving. And we still have despite being third, we still have a low share of global research publications and patents compared to our population and our number of institutions. So we really have a potential to be top, or at least number 2. Now, when we have to address these 3 challenges, and as a science and technology policymakers, As our Prime Minister has put up the vision of becoming a developed economy by 2047, we have to actually see that if we have to improve our science and technology publications, patents, technology development, translational research, what are the areas that we should be choosing? Now, as a scientist, there can be many areas, but as a science administrator, we divide this into three main buckets for our country to become a developed economy whose foundation will be based on science, technology, and innovation ecosystem. One bucket is of sustainability and fragility. I mean, we have to first exist, then only we can talk of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. If our existence is under threat, then I think we cannot have, a developed economy. And this sustainability and fragility can be like climate shift, or it can be geopolitical shift. So there are climate change issues, or there are geopolitical shift like cyber attacks, bioweapons, etc. I mean, you can go on the list. The second issue is of the resource constraints. Now, as our population increases, we will have a severe challenge of food and water scarcity, and also the critical minerals and the materials. The food and water scarcity can be really very acute. There is an acute groundwater problems, and food scarcity by 2047 with the growing population can also be very acute. For example, there is a good presentation by the Department of Biotechnology, my colleague secretary, which actually explains that by 2047 with our population, we will not have enough milk per capita which is needed, simply because the traditional way of sourcing the milk from the cattle, from cows and buffaloes, we will not have enough land and will not have enough fodders to have so many cattle which is needed to sort of say, let's say 500 grams per day per capita milk requirements, which is as per the WHO standards. So we will face even the food scarcity problem, and of course there are technological solutions for that. And then longevity and viability of life. Of course, we are now a young country. We have a demographic dividend, but by 2047 we will have an aging society, and we therefore need to think of the healthcare solutions which are needed, for an aging society from today onwards, and we cannot be thinking in 2040 for that. And of course, for transforming lifestyles, we have challenges in terms of transportations, housing, pollutions, etc. So we need technological solutions, which will solve the problems of our society, which will make our country a strong economic power by 2047, and which will make this country technologically sovereign. Now, to address this, therefore, I'm capitalizing on the potential that we have in terms of the research that is happening in our country, the human capital that we have, and the challenges that we face. This is where the policymakers did some structural interventions, and for the next 5-10 minutes, I will talk about those structural interventions. So, two most important structural and institutional interventions were done was the establishment of the Anusandhan National Research Foundation and setting up of the Research Development and Innovation Fund. So let me talk about the Anusandhan National Research Foundation. Now, as I mentioned, that our structural problem is that the research is concentrated only in the tier 1 universities like IITs, IISCs, TIFRs, JNCSRs, and such. Now expand the research bracket, and the National Education Policy actually envisioned setting up the R&D fund to improve the research funding in other universities and colleges. And with that intentions, the ANRF Act was notified in 23, and the total budget estimate was 50,000 crores. The Government of India has allocated now 14,000 crores. And the importance that the government attaches to this is that a governing board is chaired by the Honorable Prime Minister of the ANRF. Now, several programs, R&D programs, ANRF has launched, and the broad objectives are as to boost R&D in our state universities and colleges, and for that, an hub and spoke model of the state public universities was set up, out of which in the first phase, 49 state public universities have been funded under the mentorship of 7 top-tier institutions. Then the ANRF is also tasked with unifying India's fragmented research ecosystem. That's also another challenge that we have. I've not spoken about that. And driving some of the mission mode program to align with what I had mentioned, the challenges that we need to address, for becoming technologically sovereign. So this is, one structural institutional interventions that was done in the last 2 years. The second, and this is the most important intervention, is, as I mentioned, that private sector is spending very less in the R&D. And there are 2 reasons for this. One is conventionally, we have been having in the last 30 years, a service-driven industry. And of course, the manufacturing industry, which actually manufactured products based on the imported technologies. And one of the reasons for the private sector to invest on the cutting edge R&D is 2. One, the R&D, the cutting edge R&D has a lot of uncertainty and risk. And second, it has a longer gestation period. So it will require, for example, if you want to do cell and gene therapy, it will need minimum 8 years before you can conclusively conclude whether you have succeeded or you have failed. And that requires a patient capital, and our investment in the private sectors has been lacking. There are several deep tech startups, as I mentioned, but even the venture capital investment is not coming in these deep tech startups. For example, last year we had about 70 to 80 billion US dollars VC investment in the startups, out of which only 4 to 5 billion US dollars was in the technology deep tech startups. So even, despite having a very strong venture capital and angel investment ecosystem in the country, we are still, the technology and the deep tech startups are suffering from this. So to address this, the government launched 1 lakh crore research development and innovation fund. And the basic idea was that, we have to mitigate the risks of the private industry. And therefore, the government decided to take the first step, because we are always lost in a log jam that whether the private sector invests, but because they were not investing, and that's why, that translational cutting edge R&D research was not happening. This fund is meant only for investing in the private sector and the deep tech startups. This fund will not go into academia, universities, and startups, R&D labs. This will only go to the industry and the startups. Another thing is that this fund will fund up to 50% of the total project cost. The other 50% has to be raised from the private sources, either by the industry itself or by the VCs. There has been a tremendous response of this fund. This fund will be operationalized through the second level fund managers. And the RDI is now becoming a limited partner in most of the SEBI registered AIFs. But the Technology Development Board was onboarded, as the second level fund manager. And these are the 6 sunrise sectors: AI, deep tech, biotechnology, energy security, digital economy, and digital agriculture. I'm just happy to tell you that when the TDB launched the call, there was an overwhelming response. And in the first cohort, 22 deep tech startups received funding totaling about 2,000 crore by the 31st March. And that was within 6 months of the fund being launched. And in this budget, for example, 20,000 crores has been allocated. I'm confident that hundreds of such deep tech startups, including the listed company, like Tejas Networks and Idea Forge, they have been they are getting sort of support. So we have and these companies, as you can see, are doing real cutting edge work. For example, on advanced energy storage, on semiconductor design, the indigenous chip design, the Galaxy, which is building a very state of the art, high resolution, multi sensor satellites. In fact, you saw recently, the Skyroot's launch. I can tell you that when the Galaxy comes out, this will be a real cutting edge, multi-sensor satellites, which will be actually important even for the strategic applications. And there is an AI-based drug discovery company, then there is a 6G base stations, and then of course a very, very novel electric mobility solution projects by the E-plane, which is again coming out of IIT Madras. So these are just few examples. I just thought I'll few. Now our goal is that with the RBI funding, the hope is that if the government invests 1 lakh crore, that will catalyze the private sector investments, and hopefully 10 lakh crores will be invested by the private sectors in the next 10 years. And we are hoping that in the maybe in 10-15 years, some of these deep tech startups will become big, and they will therefore have a robust R&D culture, which can then of course will be in a position to interact with the academia. The second intervention was, as I mentioned, I had told you about the 3 buckets, and there are several problem statements are there. And with those intentions, the government actually launched several mission mode programs. These mission mode programs, there are about 40 such missions, but I'm just listing few. For example, cyber physical mission, green hydrogen mission, mission biopharma shakti, quantum mission, AI mission, supercomputing mission, India semiconductor mission, mission Mosam, and the deep ocean missions. And on each of these missions, depending upon the programs, the funding has ranged from 10,000 crores to 1 lakh crores. So like in the India semiconductor mission, it has been about 1 lakh. So let me talk about the quantum mission, which I was privileged to operationalize. And the quantum mission, we have set up the 4 thematic hubs in quantum computing, quantum communications, quantum sensing, and quantum materials and devices. This is about 6,000 crores missions. More than 140 plus researchers are working all over the country in 17 technical groups, and very cutting edge research is being done. The National Quantum Mission funded 2 startups. I talked about them, QNU Labs and QPI. And QPI is the 25 qubit quantum computer was developed with a chip which was fabricated outside. But they are now setting up a central fabrication facility in Bangalore, and their chip will also be fabricated indigenously. The QNU lab I already talked about. By demonstrating the 1,000 kilometer quantum QKD link, we have become number 2 in the world, actually. So no other country really has a QKD based quantum secure communication link. So these 2 companies were supported by the National Quantum Mission. There are 17 other companies which are being supported by the National Quantum Mission, through its startup support program. And I'm just telling you that the National Quantum Mission is funding substantial money to these companies. It is not just 50 lakhs or 1 crore. It is very, very substantial. It is like in tens of crores. So because you nearly need that kind of a funding to achieve the desired breakthrough. The India AI mission is of course working on making available the compute infrastructure, the data sets, which is AI Kosh, and of course the most important thing is that it is supporting the regional models in the Indian. And one of the foundation model that supported when I was editing the part of science and technology is the Bharat Gym, which is an effort by a consortia led by IIT Bombay. That in the India AI in the AI summit, which was held in February, they released a 30 billion parameter model, which is available now in 15 Indian languages. But I'm hoping that they will soon release in all 22 Indian languages. And then we have this startup company, Sarvam AI, which also has is now become a unicorn that has more than $1 billion valuation and has also developed, Indian foundation model. India Semiconductor Mission, as you know that there are 10 semiconductor fabs were approved and they are at different stages, hoping, by 2029 or 2030, we will have, fully operational semiconductor fabrication facility. The ISM 2.0 was recently approved by the cabinet, and that will now focus on the semiconductor chip design as well. In space, I think that we have done extremely well. Indian Space Research Organization has traditionally been the sort of a flag bearer of the India's research ecosystem, in the early years. But now, as you can see, that by opening up the space sectors, we have really very, very cutting edge space startups. I mean, you saw the Skyroot, but there are others like Agnikul, there are Pixel, there is a Dhruva Space, and I also talked about Galaxy, which is another satellite company and the space startups. And I can tell you that because I have interacted with them, that these are very state of the art stuff that these startups are doing. India's health tech revolution is another area, as I mentioned, that for the aging society, we really need to develop technologies and solutions for affordable healthcare. Even in the medical devices and technology, 90% of our medical devices today are imported. We are not making, significantly the medical devices. And therefore, the MedTech Mitra program is another program of ICMR, which is encouraging the medical startups industry to grow. The India's biomanufacturing ecosystem is now getting developed, and this is extremely important to solve the problem of the food scarcity and the water scarcity that I mentioned. In fact, the problem of the food scarcity, including the scarcity of the milk, etc., can only be addressed through the biomanufacturing ways. And this is the data that I showed us about the possibility of the cattle cow. Now, bioeconomy is growing significantly. It was nowhere in 2014-15. It is now 16,000 crore economy, and it can go to 30,000 crore in 2030. And biomanufacturing can actually almost in the lab you can actually make food from air. It's carbon dioxide. You can actually convert it into the food. And I mean, this is possible now. This is therefore one of the areas to address some of the, and the other possibilities are, of course, to improve the yield, to make our agriculture climate resistant, to improve the quality of seeds, make the seeds climate resistance, have a biochemicals and improved biofertilizers, etc., and also biotherapeutics. The clean energy initiatives, and I will, there are many, but I will talk about of the nuclear energy, which also we are driving it from the Niti Aayog, with the Shanti Act being enacted, just like the space sectors, we are now opening up for the nuclear sectors also for the electricity generations. And I think there is a huge opportunity for the technology startups and the private sectors to develop not only the technologies of small modular reactors and also do a very state-of-the-art research in fusion-based electricity generations maybe in near future. We also have an opportunity to provide a clean energy solution for the baseload electricity grid. In the digital communication, and since I personally work in this area, and Ajit touched upon it, in the form of the digital colonization, we were completely colonized in the 3G, 4G eras. And I can tell you this, for example, in the 2G, 3G, 95% of the IPRs were held by the US and the Europe. And as the technology evolved to 4G, the IPR shifted to Asia Pacific. In 4G, 65% of the IPRs were held by the US and Europe and 35%. And now in 5G, 70% of the IPR or 70 or 80% of the IPRs are held by Asia Pacific. And by Asia Pacific means China and South Korea, Japan. Now, but in 5G, we started contributing, and now we have a standard essential patents from India, including from our research group and the research group from IIT Madras and IIT Hyderabad. In the, I think there is some online.
Just check on the MS Teams. Somebody's mic outstation is unmuted. Just mute all outstation mics, please. IT.
Now, in the 5G, I should say that we have one of the fastest 5G deployments in the world. We have the largest number of 5G base stations in the world. I mean, so in the terms of number of base stations, we are currently the largest, and we now have an indigenous 4G, 5G stack, which was developed by the Tejas Networks, which was used to be a startup, and now it is a Tata Group company. And as I mentioned, that Tejas is now working on developing the 6G technology, for which they have received the funding from the RDA. Next slide. Next. So these were some of the mission mode interventions that I talked about. And so let me sort of give some concluding thoughts. Now, as you know that we have in the recent years are on the right track, I should say, in terms of developing a very strong ecosystem of academic research in some of the good institutions, the tier 1 institutions. And I should say that why I'm saying this is really recent, because when Jajit and I were students, let's say in IIT Kanpur, it was primarily an undergraduate focused teaching institutions that were actually true of all IITs. But it is not so now. In the recent years, the focus is entirely on the research and technology development, and that is reflected in the numbers. If you look at any large IIT like IIT Bombay or IIT Delhi or IIT Kanpur or IIT Madras, and if you look at the students' demography, 60 to 70% of the students are postgraduate students, that is masters and PhDs. Only 30% are undergraduate students. This used to be exactly opposite. 30 years ago. In fact, 90% of the students were undergraduate students. There were only 10% masters and PhD students. So that has completely now changed. But we have a huge potential. We have to also now spread this research to other universities, other institutions. We have to improve the research infrastructures, and we have to really empower the talent there. That is number one. Number two is that this research has a big gap in India in converting the academic research into translational research. And unless that gap is bridged, we will have our research confined to research labs and theses to the cupboards. We will not be able to convert it into the products and the technology, because that is only will make an impact on the nation, society, and the economy. And the third gap is that we really need the industry sector and the private sectors sort of to come up and invest in the cutting edge R&D. So, so as I mentioned, that some of the structural and mission mode interventions the government has done, but we are in a sweet spot now where the deep tech startup ecosystem is evolving. Yes, it is true that today we do not have an industry investing in the R&D, but the good news is that there are about 5,000 deep tech startups which are based upon the cutting edge R&D. If they are supported, nurtured, and they grew, then in the next 10 years, at least 500 of them will become large companies, which will be based on the cutting edge R&D. So in another next 10, 15 years, we have a hope of having a very vibrant, robust, private sector driven R&D ecosystem. But for that, we really need to nurture. We do not have, we cannot have this momentum of the startups die, and therefore we need to support them. And it is in this context, I should say, that how we can support these deep tech startups. As I mentioned, that the government is of course providing the patient capital through RDI, etc. But we need the ecosystem support from others, including the government as the buyers for these technologies. We need to do demand aggregations. We need to make sure that the indigenous technology get due support in the country for their expansions and the growth. So we are building a world-class scientific ecosystems through strategic investments, strong collaborations, by empowering talent and innovations, and by accelerating the disruptive technologies. Finally, we need to develop the technology for a sustainable future, as I already mentioned, that unless, we exist either, due to on this planet Earth or geopolitically as a country, I think we cannot talk of a developed economy. So therefore, I think technology for a sustainable future is extremely important. So our vision for a Viksit Bharat is to emerge as a very strong economic power, which is a global leader and which is based on the foundations of science, technology, and innovations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Karandikar, for that fascinating overview. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree with me that we have a very interesting ecosystem, as both the speakers speak of it. One is the ecosystem which the world has created, which is pushing us into digital colonization. And a future digital India needs to break out of the parameters that have been set by the world around us in every element and aspect, right from the degree of curve designed on a phone to the kind of materials being used and where they're harvested and the supply chain, which has made sure that the weight is against you. And the second, that's what Dr. Jayati brought about in his preliminary work, which he's going to develop on as part of the Chair of Excellence. And what Professor Abhay Karandikar brought out is the efforts being taken under the Niti Aayog and the government to create a new ecosystem of funding, breaking out into new modes, new areas, so that we can be ahead of the curve this time. The kind of funding, the support systems in the range of scientific technological efforts. As he said, we're trying to build up a world-class ecosystem. Now, these two bubbles are actually balancing on fulcrum. And that fulcrum is human capital. The policies are in place, the finances are in place, the scientific ecosystem is in place. But you have an existing world order, the world ecosystem, which you have to plug into, which is always going to constrain the speed and range at which you can move. And you're still depending back finally on the old Sati Hath Badana, the Jugaad, the human capital. 15, 16 years ago, the precursor of the Niti Aayog had forecast that India needed 1,000 universities and 50,000 colleges in 10 years. Where are we? Now, with that, I'm going to open the house for questions directed to the two speakers. Don't point them here. I've thrown the first question already for both of them. as to how do we bridge this gap between the policy drive and the ecosystem that exists with the inherent challenges and how much time will it take? They both say 2047. We all wanted as of 10 years ago. But I'm going to ask the audience now, please introduce yourself, keep it crisp, sharp, pointed, no comments, only queries. Group Captain Nara, you first. And please indicate to whom your query is directed.
Sir, Group Captain Naran from MPIDSA. All government initiatives, I think it's a very humongous effort in building the capability. But the capability translation from prototype to operationalization requires ownership. Out of the 54 ministries, which ministries have formulated the technology Atmanirbharta roadmaps? And how do we ensure their deliverables are defined? Thank you.
Captain Agnihotri, we'll take 3-4 questions together, then I'll request the panelists to respond.
Related to the associated financial reform or financial kind of like if can answer that. You mentioned a company called Galaxy, and we know that it's SAR and ECO electro-optical satellite bits. It went in very successfully, and then finally could not achieve the desired outcome. We get many space seminars, and some of the people are sitting there also. One of the main element is that the financial sector reform as far as the insurance is concerned, these things are very, very cost intensive kind of activities. And if there is a failure and there is no insurance setup, and this is I've heard it many times, that list of years will be more. And in case there is unicorn and even startup, it will go under because the kind of investment it would have incurred. So is there some process to take up this particular infirmity, if I may call it, so that the sustainability, as you said, of various tech ventures is taken up in a very correct manner.
Yeah, Master Rajesh. All right.
Good afternoon. Thank you for a very fascinating talk. My question basically relates to guardrails. We develop technology in India, and sometimes some of the deep techs we don't support enough, and then they get bought up by outside. So I'll give you 2 examples. One is when the DTI phase, we expected that the US will give us our technology under the DTI, never happened. Technology we developed under by the US. Recently, you must have heard about this firm which has been acquired by an American VC which manufactures mill-grade PCBs for DRDO, etc. So how do we make sure that we have enough guardrails that whatever technology and IPR we develop in-house, as it is, we are struggling to keep it taken over by foreign people who will get control and again sort of decolonize.
Mr. Ravi Srivas.
R&D Innovation Fund of 1 lakh crore is 1/8 the average annual inflow of venture capital into startups. So my question is, can we develop a policy which disincentivizes this flow? We have 28,000 startups in e-commerce, so how do we disincentivize this flow of capital into quick return but low national return startups, and how do we incentivize the flow of global capital into the areas which are actually required for our development and security?
Thank you for that. I request Professor Abhay to respond to this, and since most of the queries are related to your talk, and Dr. Jayji to fill in for the balance. Sir.
Yes. So I think the first question was that which ministries have formulated the technology sovereignty and Atmanirbharta roadmap. So I think almost all ministries have formulated, and that is why those mission mode programs are actually meant to achieve the technology sovereignty and Atmanirbharta. So, for example, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology in India, Semiconductor Mission and India AI Mission is really meant for achieving the Atmanirbharta in semiconductor manufacturing and the AI. And I think so that is now the second question was financial sector reforms. Yes, I think this is recognized by the government. In fact, and I think the next two questions are also related to this. One thing I should tell you that is 1 lakh crore RDI fund. One of the important, the biggest reforms was done in this, that this fund does not come under the purview of the GFR, General Financial Rules. It was approved in the cabinet that new liberalized financial rules will be made for this fund, and GFR 2017 shall not be applicable. So new liberalized financial rules were notified in the March 2026 for this fund. And this is, I should say, this is one of the biggest reform that this, because earlier also the government has done some investment in private sector, has given some funding to startups, but they were all under the sort of GFR. This fund is operating under the new utilization of RDI Special Financial Rule, March 2026, they were sort of notified. Now, reforms for the insurance and other things that you mentioned, this is under discussion. In fact, this is not just applicable to space startups, but this will also be applicable to, let's say, nuclear sectors and other things. So this is indeed a policy matter which we are currently discussing in my sort of current role also. Now, regarding guardrails for the deep tech startups, yes, I think that is clearly an issue. And one of the objectives of setting up a 1 lakh crore or almost $10 billion sovereign public funds for investing in the private sector for these reasons only. Because one of the conditions for RDI fund is that the company must have the global headquarters in India, must have registered IP in India, and must be controlled by the resident Indians. In fact, these are the three conditions. That is where I mean, hopefully, we will be able to channelize other Indian private sector investments into the deep tech startups and prevent, from them acquiring. We have not put into place right now more stringent measures, which government can always do in terms of export controls, etc. But I think that is, I should say, a sort of a step forward. Now, colonization by venture capital, you see, it is when the startup ecosystem was evolving, it was needed because the capital needs to flow in. As long as the control and the management and the ownership rests in the Indian citizens and the resident Indians, I think the capital flow is actually welcome. But obviously, in some cases, as was mentioned, that some of the technology startups may get acquired by the foreign entities.
What was happening is that, as I mentioned, that in some of the technology startups, Indian investors were finding it risky to invest. And while this has been like a routine, like in the Silicon Valley and other places, I'm hoping now that and therefore we say that this RDI is one of the most transformative initiatives, because once I think the 1 lakh crore gets pumped into the market, this will actually stimulate more private sector capital investment from the Indian investors who were actually shying away from investing in the technology startups company, and maybe investing in real estates and stock market. So obviously we need to create that ecosystem. The investors have to see the benefits of their investments, and then they will sort of invest. So that appreciation is also needed, which is already existent, for example, in the Silicon Valley ecosystem, where the investors see benefits in investing in a technology startups. But I think I should say that that is growing, and maybe we are late, but nevertheless, I think in the next 5-10 years, we should see the results in terms of creating an indigenous robust ecosystem. The only point which was related to this ministry's formulating the technology sovereignty issue is I think we need this, and I mentioned in my concluding thing that we need some support from the ecosystem. So for example, there are so many defense officers are here. We need support from them to buy the products from these technology startups. If our own Indian agencies do not support our own indigenous technology development, then we will always be lying in this trap, because industry is always meant for business. And if they don't get the business, they will shut down or get acquired by others who see value in their product. So we need that support from the Indian agencies to create market access. So they get the GFR 17 removed for defense, you will get all those orders that you want. Dr. Jayajit, from digital colonization to digital capitalism, safeguarding our startups from the global predators, your views?
Sort of from this Atmanirbhar as a word and the fact that we have to protect what's happening on the ground in spite of this huge pressure right from the top and all the good work being done by people such as Professor Gandhi, and there are many more. On the ground, somehow there is a narrative warfare that we are into protectionism. And there's all protectionist steps being taken. And protectionism is a bad one. I don't know where this has come from, and it has been deeply ingrained. I've heard statements like, "Wo kya kahenge?" Who as in what is a global player say? Now, who are we working for? For war or for us? Let me give some examples. Atmanirbharta is not just an Indian initiative. There is an act called the Build America, Buy America Act, called the BABA Act, which is basically Atmanirbhar America Act. In fact, the example I was giving about the British ships was one of the first recorded instances of Atmanirbhar Britain initiative of 1800. There are many such steps being taken. To the example, to the question around the guardrails, which is a very critical question. US has a law called the CFIUS Act, under which anything that they say is strategic for the country, because everything is produced by the private sector, they don't really have a public sector, those companies cannot be a part of it. There is a very detailed, prolonged process through which you can buy American companies. You simply can't walk in and pick them up. Israel went through this whole issue that we keep using taxpayers' money, give them tax breaks, and create these startups. And what happens? An American company swoops in and buys these startups off. And they really kept questioning each other, questions were raised in the parliament, and they came to the conclusion after a long debate is that that's our business. Our business is to create startups, somebody will harvest them, and we'll create the next generation of startups, which is going to disrupt the startups we created earlier. So you'll come and buy our startups, the next startup will disrupt the previous startup. And that is how Israel's startup ecosystem is working. Startup itself is an industry. However, within that, they have identified the startups and the technologies which are critical for their defense, and that they viciously protect. And we need to obviously think through those things. And obviously, as you see, there are detailed thinking happening in the government towards that process. Finally, in terms of the tech ownership, let me give a little example. About 10, 15, maybe no, 20 years back, in one of the corridors of the government, I would hear that, oh, we created such a wonderful hearing aid, nobody in the industry is buying it. It was a government lab with government funding creating a hearing aid. Now, the point is that nobody is buying is because who asked you to make it? You didn't have a skin in the game. You took taxpayers' money and built something which was not needed by anybody, no matter how good it is. And therefore, if you look at the architecture of what Professor Karandikar just showed, is that those who have skin in the game, those who understand the market, they are being backed by the government. So public funds is now going into the right channels in a very transparent manner. Right? And those who have the capabilities will be executing it. They have the skin in the game. They will make sure that it survives, and they won't come back to the government saying, please give me a market, please help me, please buy me, and so on and so on. They will find out a way, like so many other entrepreneurs have done. And therefore, one of the things that we can really consider, in addition to all the happening, is better demand assurance, because that's what Korea, Taiwan, others have done. They've given demand assurance, and therefore some of the funding comes automatically when there's a demand assurance for, especially technology which is not moonshot technology, it's a delta technology. I mean, you know it's feasible, it can be done with a bit of a investment. Those technologies we don't need to fund, we just give a demand assurance. But do keep in mind that OKR is still there in the sense that under the WTO, we cannot stop players from accessing the Indian market in all the areas that we have signed for, except for government procurement. And there is tremendous amount of pressure on the government to let that go and have the WTO regulations also on the government procurement. Do keep in mind that the countries which started WTO and who framed these rules are not following a single rule of WTO. And that's all.
Thank you, Dr. Jaydeep. It's almost hysterical that you talk of a time when the government's built hearing aids for the public. Now I've got a time for a short, quick round for questions. Keep them crisp. I'm going to start with Mr. Richa Mishra.
Thank you. And it's a very wrong thing to have a reporter on dais. So I am like itching to ask this question to Professor Karandikar. So we talk quantum, we talk AI, everything, but everything needs power and electricity. Can our grid handle it?
So I'll get back. I'll just take a few more quick queries. Dr. Sanjay Babu.
Let me first compliment you both for excellent and very interesting presentations. I'm a professor of economics, so it's heartening to hear IIT products talk about colonization. Our entire industrialization program in this country was built on the recognition that the West will not allow us to develop. So what you nowadays fashionably call Atmanirbharta, we used to call self-reliance. It's the same word, one in Hindi, other in English. But our strategy, whether in space, whether in nuclear, whether in industrial development, capital goods industry, always been self-reliance. Certain mistakes happened, failures happened, and successive governments have been collected. My question to both of you is that there is a popular recognition in India today that our industrial development is being thwarted by excessive competition from China. China's policy of mercantilism has contributed to deindustrialization. So on the industrial side, we see China as a threat. After listening to both of you, I'm glad to see that you are recognizing that even from the United States, there's a threat of digital colonization. So how does this idea shape strategic thinking, geopolitical thinking? I mean, since we are now in USI and not in an IIT, I think it's important to ask ourselves, what does this mean for Indian foreign policy, national security, national strategy, that both the top two countries of the world, China and the United States, are actually in some ways challenges. We used to think of them as opportunities.
Thank you. That's from Dr. Purushottam.
Thank you. Absolutely incredible discussion and so many things that resonate with us. I'm a former ambassador Smita Purushottam, and I also run a technology network. We've been focusing on public procurement and ownership issues, and especially like the emphasis by both speakers on these topics. I just wanted to point out that QPIA, you mentioned it, Dr. Karandikar, but the Andhra Pradesh government is going to procure chips from IBM. Why not procure quantum chips from QPIA? That's the only way a public procurement system can actually promote domestic technology development. And the other very important issue is data ownership, data sovereignty. Today, big tech is coming and it has a complete stranglehold on Indian data. All our data, whether it is on AWS or Google Cloud, our national highways data, health data, everything belongs to them. How are we going to develop technological sovereignty unless we have some policy, that Indian clouds should be promoted, Indian service, and big tech is coming, setting up these data centers which will destroy our environment. Why not preserve our limited resources for our own data centers?
Thank you, Investor. General Malik, last question. We keep it very short, sir, because Professor Abhay has a meeting he has to rush off to.
My question is to Professor Karandikar. Firstly, the slide which you shown on ASPI, I've been seeing this slide for a long time. Do you really believe this? AI, US is ahead of China. China is ahead of this thing. So these are the vested interests they show, and there are foreign affairs journals, specific papers which have debunked this. So this is the one observation. Second is, it's nice to know there's so much of fund is being spent and all, very nice. Last year, I went to IIT Kanpur. They have got a technology incubator called CQY Hub. They displayed a lot of stalls and all. Every stall I asked is a very good thing. Where are the funds coming from? They said, no fund. I want you to answer the type of fund that you have shown and the type which is on ground. How to manage this gap? Second, sir.
You're running out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. In gentlemen, Professor Karandikar has to go for a meeting, so I'm going to request him to respond. Dr. Jayashree very graciously is going to be here and is going to be joining us for tea, so we're going to have an opportunity to quiz him and take the discussions forward. I know there are at least half a dozen more hands waiting to ask questions. Professor Karandikar, over to you, sir.
Yeah. So I think the first question of the electricity demand. Yes, I mean, the electricity demand is going to rise. And obviously we cannot serve this using fossil fuels only. So we have to therefore expand in terms of renewables, and solar is one of the challenge in solar is having of the renewables is the and battery storage because you don't get sun in the night. So we have to therefore have a storage technology also. But I think the most important factor could be nuclear. Currently, I think we generate only 6 to 7% of the total electricity demand from the nuclear, and unlike in other countries like France, where it is 25 to 30%. So we have a huge potential. And particularly if you look at thorium-based reactors, we also will not be dependent critically on the supply chains also. We can develop indigenously here. So I think opening up the nuclear sector for power generations is a big step forward. Of course, the challenge there are twofold is the generation and the technology development and deployment requires a huge investment financially. And also, some amount of public perceptions needs to be changed because there is a resistance on the ground by the people. So those two, but small modular reactors require less space, also are fairly safe and can be deployed. So I think that is sort of one of the issues. Regarding, I think one question was Andhra Pradesh government is buying IBM chips, why not from QPI? No, I think, let me just tell you that Andhra Pradesh government is in their new capital. Amravati is building a quantum valley.
where IBM is setting up its data centers and bringing their 136 qubit quantum computer. So it's not Andhra Pradesh government is buying, but the QII also will have a space sort of there. Of course, IBM is quite ahead in superconducting based quantum computing. But I have to tell you here that in the area of quantum technology, we really have an edge in quantum communication. We are really like a globally state of the art. And the next edge can be quantum sensing. Because in quantum sensing, quantum computing, we still have a long way to catch because billions of dollars of investments have already been done by IBM and Google. But still having an indigenous quantum computer for some applications is actually quite that way heartening. Now, regarding the data flow, yes, this is an issue, but I think more than data drain, I see the issue that in India, the data remains in silos and we do not have a structured way of getting all the data on, let's say, a federated data exchange or something. In fact, even in the government, I think every ministry is keeping the data with themselves and not sharing with another ministry. So that is a larger problem. The user data going on to Google and Facebook and Meta is a much larger issue. I just don't want to discuss here in the public, but that issues are, I think, important and are recognized. Yes, I think, but I think in order for the data to use ourselves indigenously, forget about its data drain, we have a challenge there in terms of a data available in a structured format to, let's say, Indian companies or Indian researchers, or even, for other government agencies, let's say for the state governments and vice versa, the state government's data to be used by the central government. Now, regarding China, yes, I think geopolitically, there is an issue, and I really tend to differ here with you on the ASPI issue because it is true that the China started with the copying the technology and other things, but in the recent years, they have really advanced in terms of basic research, and I think this fact cannot be overlooked. One can maybe I think ASPI's data maybe it is not 7, maybe it is 10 or 20, but that's not really the issue. But the fact remains that China has really advanced in some of the very cutting edge basic research. It is not just only products and technologies. They have strengthened their university ecosystem. I'll just give you one example. Let's take that Tsinghua University and IIT Delhi. I can give one examples. In 1995, Tsinghua University was at the same status as IIT Delhi in terms of number of papers, faculty, students, everywhere. I think in 30 years, Tsinghua University has now producing like 20 times of the research publications, and also, in terms of the technology in development that they are doing, the number of PhDs produced. So I think it cannot be denied that they are, so they had a multi-pronged approach. They started maybe with copying, then focusing on manufacturing, expanding their low-cost manufacturing base. But now I think in the last few years, they have really concentrated on cutting-edge basic research. So I think this is really an issue and which we need to be cognizant of both in terms of basic and sort of applied research apart from technology and product development. Regarding the startup funding that you saw, yes, I think there are a large number of startups and many startups need funding. So one of the mechanisms that we are exploring is to channelize them through what we call as the focused research organizations, FROs. And many of these technology business incubators are getting designated now as the FROs. I think it will be announced. And maybe then the funding will get channelized through them. But more than the funding, apart from the market access,
One important issue these startups are facing, particularly the technology startups, is the availability of prototyping, fabrication, and testing facility. So I think because many of these technology areas requires very high-end equipment, and not every startups can make that investment, and they cannot raise funding also for that. Either the government can do. So therefore, having a shared infrastructure in for example, if you saw the space sector startups, many of the space sector startups, including, I think you saw the Agnicool and Skyroot, have leveraged the ISRO's infrastructures, actually, because they cannot invest. ISRO has invested over 5 decades, so much infrastructures there. So startups cannot have everything what ISRO has, and so many startups. So availability of a shared infrastructure, uh, availability of a world-class certification facility, and sort of access to market are actually the key to success of the startups. And once these are available, I think the funding will flow.
Thank you, Professor Karandikar. Ladies and gentlemen, you agree with me that this has been fascinating. It's just too short.
फोन तो उठाया
You
हाँ
don't fly us
शुक्र है
out.
तुमने फोन तो उठाया
Please close the outstation, mute the mics, please. Despite the rain gods and the Delhi traffic, we still have a full house, as well as you heard intermittently, we've got a full house online elsewhere. One would have thought that in a defense services institute, we'd be more interested on strategy. Professor Karandikar, you can see how popular your thoughts, your views are over here. And if you can just crack the GFR 17 for defense, I tell you, you'll get a lifetime honorary membership over here. And in every defense service institute everywhere in the country. But jokes aside, it's been absolutely fascinating to see we all are aware of the kind of challenges we are facing in technology. Is the new imperialist world, is the new colonizing world, is the new equations being drawn of the haves and have-nots, and the recognition of the challenges, the government policies to boost the technique, the innovation, and the funding, and promote the ecosystem. Ecosystems don't come of their own. Ecosystems grow endemically, indigenously. And the efforts being taken are to promote and push for that ecosystem. And as Professor Karandikar threw it back at us, we are part of that same ecosystem. We can't sit on this side and say, what are you doing about it? He's throwing it back at us and saying, what are you doing about it? Well, Professor, we invited you here. We are fascinated with your talk, and we want you to come back again and again and have longer discussions, including closed-door discussions on issues that we can't discuss in the open forum. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Professor Abhay Karandikar and Dr. Jayajit Bhattacharya for the wonderful intervention. Speak out what it is, ma'am, for the audience.
innovation, and service to the nation, benefiting a wide range of hospitals across the service. We are deeply honored by the gracious presence of Professor Abhay, whose keynote address has provided profound insights into the transformative role of technology, research, and innovation in shaping India's future. So, your vision and leadership have greatly enriched this occasion, and we are sincerely grateful for your time and inspiring thoughts. A heartfelt appreciation also goes to Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, sir, for his thought-provoking Chair of Excellence address. Thus, the perspectives on digital India and India's developing journey have added immense value to today's deliberations. We are grateful for your continued association and support. We extend our deepest gratitude to the Tripathi family for allowing us the privilege of joining them in celebrating the life and legacy of Shri Abhay Tripathi, sir. Your presence lends warmth, dignity, and profound mood meaning to this memorial lecture. Our respectful thanks are due to the senior officers of the Indian Army, Navy, and Air Force, whose presence reflects the strong bond between India's strategic community, academia, and the armed forces in advancing national security and national development. I would also like to express our sincere gratitude to the faculty, staff, interns, and every member of the organizing team for the dedication, meticulous planning, and tireless efforts towards successful conduct of today's event. Finally, I thank each distinguished guest for your valuable presence. Your participation has made this memorial lecture not merely an event, but a meaningful tribute to a life devoted to knowledge, excellence, and nation building. As we conclude, may the legacy of Shri Abhay Tripathi, sir, continue to inspire future generations of scholars, innovators, and leaders, and may the Chair of Excellence serve as a lasting beacon of knowledge, collaboration, and service to the nation. May I now request our esteemed guest to remain seated to allow the dignitaries in the first row to move out for the high tea which is being offered there at the final.
And please join me in thanking everybody, especially Dr. Jackie.
These are the exclusive cartoons, they're not in other areas.
I told you, like 12 years to be there, so I've been blessing you and blessing everybody. That's why.